the same vein as the trees growing towards the light, I think both of us have been seeing, and I know I've been experiencing how creation is actually starting to speak a lot louder to me, and continuing with the application of just what we're seeing and using the dead limbs on a tree, we were applying that to even in terms of like relationships that are in our lives. And there's also the scripture that says that where the Lord prunes the ones he loves, you know what I mean? Using it in terms of chastisement and things of that sort. But also I think there are things that are dead in our lives that need to be pruned off. The image, I'm looking at it right now, the image that is coming to mind is that understanding what's happening in that tree is that there's a bunch of wasted nutrients that are going towards that dead branch, and it's wasted. It's not being used for anything. It's completely dead. You're wasting this energy and nutrients on a dead branch. And once you lop that off, then the tree can actually send the nutrients to the place where it can go, and it can grow a lot more luscious, right? So that's something that I think that could be ministered to us as well. There are things that just need to be cut out and broken off.
And the only way that we can do that is when we're honest. Remember, we talked about this yesterday about honesty. And
we can get into the trenches of whole types of applications, you know what I mean?
Right. I think the way that we are able to discern and decipher the things that are dying or dead in our lives.
Yeah, how do we identify what's dead or what's dying or what needs to be cut off? Is the scripture that you were talking about was like the knowledge of the Holy One brings discernment. Good judgment.
Yeah.
So you're only going to be able to know what will be truly able to be cut off, because you may cut something off that you're not supposed to, or you may cut something off that needs to be cut off. And how do I know what the difference is between the two? You know what that is by the knowledge of the Holy One. He knows what is good for you. He knows what's bad for you, and seeking his face and living in a relationship with him is going to really bring those things to light. So good. There was what was the other scripture? It was good. Hidden hatred
makes you a liar.
Makes you a liar.
Yeah.
Muse on that one.
Yeah.
Be honest.
Yeah.
That's basically telling you to be honest.
Yeah.
Flesh it out. Think about it. Talk about it. Don't
And
keep things in the dark.
What is required for honesty is vulnerability.
Oh, we're gonna go here.
Yes, we are.
Are we gonna go here? Are we gonna make this a whole episode? Do we want to? Let's talk about vulnerability. Do we want to dive into this right now?
It depends on how deep you want to get, but we had some amazing conversation about how, Christ being our teacher, right? A student is not above his teacher, and Christ came in ultimate vulnerability. You know what I mean?
Well, let's define vulnerability. What is vulnerability? Vulnerability. When I think of vulnerability, I think complete exposure.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is how I feel.
Right.
This is what is going on. This is what is truly in my heart.
Right.
There's no ulterior motives.
Right.
And people don't want to speak how they truly feel because they don't want to be vulnerable.
Right.
Because if they're vulnerable, that means the other party now has information that can work against them.
Right.
Or they're exposing themselves and they could get hurt. Or they, people that are vulnerable in a relationship, like you and I, we're vulnerable with each other.
Sure.
And
it's laying your heart out bare, knowing that it could be wrecked, you know, and to me, I think that's the most courageous thing to do.
It is.
A lot of times I think or at least we're brought up in a culture that tells us to just toughen up, have thick skin and things like that.
Bury it down deep.
And while those things,
there's a place for that.
There's a place for it, right? But we're talking about just being honest, and transparent in relationships, before God, most importantly. And that does take vulnerability and being able to be okay with being bare, bearing our soul before another,
And the relationships that you have that where you are vulnerable with that other party, those tend to be the most meaningful relationships.
Absolutely.
Not this surface value.
Yeah.
Right?
Surface level.
Surface level.
Yeah.
It's just, you're just going through motions of life. And it's like, no, when you're able to be completely vulnerable with another person, the impacts of that relationship are a lot more. It's a lot more meaningful. And what you were saying, what we started off saying about all this already, we'd talk about, like, Christ illustrated the epitome of vulnerability. I mean, granted, all the pictures that you see and everything you see, like in TV shows and stuff like that, it doesn't show like the real true horror. I mean, they get close, but it's not the real true horror that he really actually endured. He was naked, completely exposed. He was completely vulnerable.
He was completely stripped.
Yep.
Of when that scripture talks about, like, he laid it all down, his divinity down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, literally down to the, being bare before others, like all of that shame.
You can't get any more vulnerable or
exactly.
naked or ashamed.
Yeah.
You can't get any more than that.
Yeah.
And what I think is beautiful is that he did that for us.
Yes.
He
did that in
took that step to be vulnerable with us, and I love that. I love that. That's the relationship. That's the relationship that is the king who wants a relationship with you to the point that he will be willing to go to this extent for you. He didn't have to do it for himself. He was the God. He was the God man.
Right.
And I don't have to do this thing. He chose to do it. He wanted to do it. He wanted to be stripped. He wanted to be beaten. And he chose to be vulnerable for you. And that's our king.
So I guess circling back to what I was saying in terms of, like, we have the greatest example of vulnerability there.
That's
and
Christ.
if he was willing to do that to that extent, how we should be willing, to make ourselves vulnerable before others. And
he showed us how to do it.
Yeah.
He showed us how. So be honest, be vulnerable for meaningful relationships.
And it's free.
And it is.
And there's opportunity for growth there. So
it can get uncomfortable.
But
comfort zones are a wonderful place.
Yeah.
But nothing grows there. So stay thirsty, stay hungry,
stay close to the one who provides both.
Ooh, I like that. And what is it? Stay vulnerable, right?
All right, y'all.
I got some birds to save.
Bye.
Cheers.